Hey pals, welcome to the third episode of SJ Weekly, July 8th, 2018. Now, some of you have been sending me links to include in this stuff, and I am getting them. And if you do have more links to send, please send them to me on Twitter or in Discord. And our first piece of SJW nonsense from the St. Paul Public Library was actually sent in by a viewer. So here we go. All are welcome at St. Paul Public Library. We belong together. St. Paul Public Library celebrates Pride 2018. I've personally never understood the reason for things like Pride Month or Pride Parades, but on a general holiday festival level, I don't really object to them. You know, if you go walking around Chinatown around Chinese New Year, you're going to see a celebration. If you're in Canada and you head down to the park and it's July 1st, you're going to see Canada Day celebrations. I don't view Pride Parades or Pride Month as some kind of massive amount of degeneracy. Well, there is sometimes when you see people like walking around in bondage gear and kids being exposed to that. But in general, as a general celebration thing, I don't really care. However, I brought up kids, and that's where we're getting into this, because this is a public library. Let's scroll down a bit. You belong at SPPL. In our spaces, you will find information, programs and services, community, and safety. Please join us. Okay, well, they're trying to be inclusive, right? You have must-read teen books for Pride Month. No, that's not bad. I definitely remember a lot of questioning kids in high school, and I think the teenage years, the high school years, are where it's actually appropriate to really start introducing LGBT content. If it's ever going to be appropriate, that's about the age. Because really, that's when our society starts introducing a lot of heterosexual content, at least in a sexual sense, right? Because high school is generally when people start getting laid. So it makes sense to me. But not to young kids, and we'll see that in just a minute. Finding LGBTQIA materials. If you're looking at materials in the library's collection, you may have had a frustrating experience. Maybe because there's not that much of them in general. Okay? Say together, books on family. Kids' books on family separation. You know, I've always actually liked kids' books like this, where, yeah, they're cutesy little stories, but there's going to be some kind of moral to them. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm fine with that. On World Refugee Day, held every year on June 20th, we commemorate the strength, courage, and perseverance of millions of refugees. A Long Way Gone, Memoirs of a Boy Soldier. You know, if a boy soldier managed to sneak to Canada and said, please grant me asylum, give me refugee status, I would actually be okay with that. You know, I'm certainly not some kind of ethno-nationalist or anything. However, there's a lot of people who aren't refugees, who aren't fleeing a war-torn area. They're just coming in. And we're accepting them because we don't want to be called racist. There are more migrants now than refugees by far. And there seems to be this conflation between the two, at least on the left-wing side of politics right now. LGBTQ books for kids. Check out these chapter books and graphic novels for kids that include characters that are LGBTQ. Okay, well, you have The Other Boy, The Pants Project, Better Nate Than Ever. I've never read any of these books, obviously, but I can remember reading, kids' novels when I was in grade 4 or grade 5, back when I was young, right? And I remember them not really having anything in the way of a romantic subplot. For example, there was a novel, it was a series of a kid who was like, I think between like 8 and 12, like this is kind of the age range we're talking. The series started when he was that young and ended when he was that old. And he was like a young hockey player, right? He was just kind of playing for his local team, and all of his friends were these kids who were part of the hockey team. And they would, because they were so young, they could actually do mixed gender teams without it being a serious detriment. So they have these mixed gender teams, and they go around and they play hockey games at all these various schools in the novel. But also there's like, they end up like foiling some kind of a heist, or I don't remember the details, but like basically there's stuff that goes beyond hockey. And because, it's a kid's novel, the kids get to foil the robbers or the bad guys, as well as traveling around and doing their hockey stuff. You know how kids' novels can get sometimes. They just had like an adventure. And despite there being girl characters and boy characters in the novel, there was no romantic subplot. None of them had crushes on each other because they were too young for it to really be anything serious. Like if you're a kid, do you remember your first girlfriend when you were like 5 years old and like she smooched you on the cheek and it was a big deal and like you held your hands over your mouth and like that was the extent of the relationship? Kids around this age, their capacity for romance is limited. So having specifically LGBTQ books for kids Like this book here, The Other Boy. This kid here looks quite young. Is he going to be getting into a serious relationship with the other boy? It just doesn't seem like you could write a believable story in this specific genre. And here's another good choice here. The Skin You Live In teaches acceptance without cramming it down your throat. Isn't this the ideal? Teach differences and not say that one's better than the other? Or not say that one is more deserving than the other? Either way, isn't that the best thing to do? Then you get this. Drag Story Hour at Rondo. Recorded Monday, June 11th, 2018. Now, this is where the line is drawn for me personally. I'm just going to zoom in here. Check this out. Look at this black kid's face right here. He's like, what the fuck am I doing, dude? What the fuck is this shit? I've seen pictures of stuff like this before, where you have drag queens show up, made up in full drag attire, and read books to kids. Now there's two camps of kids. One camp where they're too young to know the difference, and they're basically going to see them as clowns. And I don't mean to actually call them clowns, though I'm sure some of them are, but they're going to see them as clowns because they just see makeup. They see like really bright, flashy outfits. They don't really care about the sexual side of it. They're just like, oh, here's a goofy person wearing something outlandish, and we're going to read stories together, and they're too young to really understand, and that's fine. And then you have kids who do kind of know what's going on. And that's where you have to be careful, because just as I wouldn't want to expose a kid as young as this boy here to overtly heterosexual content, I wouldn't want to expose them to overtly homosexual content either. Or even trans content, for that matter. I think sex is something that should be introduced like in the early teen years, once those kids are actually capable of being sexual creatures themselves. I can tell you guys, when I was 9 or 10 years old, I did not care about anything romantic. I just played Super Nintendo, man. I didn't give a shit. Come meet some fabulous drag queens and kings at the library. Why? But speaking of not understanding things, I have a tweet here from Donald J. Thump, who is, I guess, a rabbit version of Donald Trump. This guy actually, I'm gonna follow this guy. This guy actually seems kind of cool. This was posted in the 3rd of April, 2018, back during the YouTube shooting situation. So you have a guy named Token White Boy, 19, dollars to donuts. The YouTube shooter is a white, misanthropic Trump supporter whose Facebook profile pic includes a MAGA hat. Those of us speaking in the future here, we know exactly how wrong this was, but let's see where this goes. But let's go down this rabbit hole, as Donald J. Thump would have said. ABC 7 News. Nassim Akdam has an alleged website with a manifesto that targets YouTube for censorship and demonetization of her video content. And there she is. Now, she looks quite white, but she also looks Persian, and that's kind of the strange thing about Persians, is that they often are what SJWs would call white passing. That's why JonTron's Persian. However, everyone calls him a white male, but he's actually a Persian male. But if you look up like the pictures or the videos of Iranian women who are taking off the hijab or dancing in the streets or just trying to basically rebel against the Islamist government, they look like they could be white, or like maybe like Italian, you know? Like of course Italians are white, but you know what I mean? Like they have kind of the Southern European features. But no, Persians are from the Middle East. They are a different ethnic group, and they are not that closely genetically related to European people. And our friend Token White Boy 19 has this to say about it. #LoveAMuslim. Muslims are friendly, peace-loving, and hospitable people deserving of a happy life. Most Muslims around the world decry violence and suffering. They're beautiful people, and the essence of their faith rests in diversity and universal humanity. Universal humanity unless you're not a Muslim, right? You do realize that it wasn't the Middle East that came up with the concept of universal human rights. That was Europe. And it could have been somewhere else. It could have been other places, but it was Europe. I'm not saying that universal human rights are the property of the white race or something ridiculous like that. I'm just saying that Europeans happened to come up with it first. And it also happened to be the best way to run a society. And you don't really see anybody saying this about Christians, do you? Like, you're never going to see a #LoveAChristian. Christians are friendly, peace-loving, and hospitable people deserving of a happy life. That's because most Christians are, and everyone knows it. The reason that Muslims aren't known for it is because there are more violent Muslims. And maybe that's a pretty bad thing to say, but it seems to be the truth at this point. There are obviously liberal Muslims. There are obviously Muslims who don't want to enforce Sharia law across every single land that they immigrate to. But there are certainly more radical Muslims than there are, say, radical Christians. Of course, you might say that the Christians are culturally dominant right now and they're part of the white hetero-capitalist patriarchy or some bullshit. But we can choose other religions that aren't Christianity and have been discriminated against in the past and yet still are generally not as violent as Islam and don't have as many extreme followers as Islam does. You know, look at Hindus, look at Buddhists, look at Sikhs, look at the Jews even. And regarding the whole YouTube shooter thing, of course, people, blamed Charlie Hebdo when they got shot up by radical Islamists. So if she really was a Muslim, maybe we can blame YouTube in the same way for putting those yellow demonetization marks on every single video for everyone ever. Of course, I'm not going to do that, but I could see some people doing that. And speaking of political double standards in the media, in 2013, a rodeo clown wore an Obama mask and was permanently banned from performing ever again. In 2018, this celebrity told Trump to die, but will keep his blue check and will continue to work in Hollywood. And the tweet in question is from our good friend, Joss Whedon, destroyer of franchises. Donald Trump is killing this country. Some of it quickly, some slowly, but he spoils and destroys everything he touches. He emboldens monsters, wielding guns, governmental power, or just smug doublespeak. Or Russia. My hate and sadness are exhausting. Die, Don. Just quietly die. Regardless of how you feel about Trump, there has to be a single standard by which we judge this stuff. And this guy here is right, talking about the clown wearing an Obama mask. If somebody had wrote this about President Obama, he would have been run out of town, and you and I know it. Trump is currently catching flack for simply continuing to implement the policies that Obama put into place. And nobody had a problem with them when it was Obama who put that shit in. If you ever needed some kind of a tell that this wasn't really about politics for the American left right now, it was about tribalism, this is it. You have somebody like Kathy Griffin who poses with a severed Trump head and then crying as the internet gives her the rightful backlash that she deserves over that. But man, if she had been holding a severed Obama head, she would never have another job in Hollywood ever again. This is just a case of wealthy, larger-than-life Hollywood elites telling regular people how they should think and feel, while simultaneously looking down on those regular people. And Joss Whedon, that stopped working in 2016. You should probably give it up at this point. And finally, we come to the end today with a tweet from NYT Opinion. Strip all the other rationales away from this draconian immigration policy. This is at the core. White extinction anxiety. Now, I don't think that the white race is going extinct anytime soon. There's quite a lot of us out there. And honestly, anybody on the alt-right who is crying about whites being outbred or going extinct, they're honestly just fear-mongering. I think there are more white people now than ever before in the history of humanity. That being said, if white people actually were going extinct, let's just have the hypothetical here for a minute. If white people were seriously going extinct, like the numbers showed that there were going to be no more white people like within my lifetime, or even earlier, would white people not have the right to have some anxiety about that? I mean, I think so. I don't think it's a racist thing to want to see your family line continue into the future. But let's actually read this article by Mr. Charles M. Blow. Last week, Pat Buchanan was on the Laura Ingraham show to discuss the humanitarian crisis Donald Trump has created at the border by ripping children away from their parents. He was not particularly sympathetic to these families' plights, as he shouldn't be because the parents have committed felonies, the kids are victims of their parents' terrible actions, and they have to be separated. Instead, choosing to focus on the demographic danger facing whiteness. This is the great issue of our time, and the real question is whether Europe has the will and the capacity, and America has the capacity, to halt the invasion of the countries until they change the character, political, social, racial, ethnic, character of the country entirely. Now, there is a fair amount of fear-mongering in that statement, but at the same time, worrying about changing the political and social character of any nation is actually a legitimate thing to worry about. If the United States was dealing with a bunch of people coming from Mexico and South America and Central America who all wanted to come to the USA to become Americans, to adopt American cultural values, to take part in the American political system, I would have no problem with this. And I honestly think that most Americans, outside of the alt-right, would have no problem with this too, because their skin color doesn't matter. Their racial identity doesn't matter. But these people don't want to come in and become Americans. They want to create enclaves. They want to isolate themselves. They want to ghettoize the areas that they live in. Mexicans illegally crossing the border to become American, while it's still a problem, it's a far lesser problem than Mexicans illegally crossing the border to create Mexican enclaves on American soil. He continued, "You cannot stop these sentiments of people who want to live together with their own and they want their borders protected. Make no mistake here, Buchanan is talking about protecting white dominance, white culture, white majorities, and white power." I think he's talking about protecting American dominance, American culture, American majorities, and American power. And America, despite what you might have learned at some kind of lefty college, is not exclusively white. A few days earlier on his blog, he expanded on this point. The existential question, however, thus remains: how does the West, America included, stop the flood tide of migrants before it alters forever the political and demographic character of our nations and our civilization? That's still an important question. I know there's definitely a part of Buchanan that's talking about race, and I know that is an inherently ridiculous idea to really be worried about race. Like, it isn't a little bit, but at the same time, it's also not the prime factor here. The prime factor is culture. And altering the political character of our nations and civilization is the primary problem here. It doesn't matter what race the people are. You cannot import hundreds of thousands or millions of people who culturally want to see the downfall of the country and the society that they're being imported into. Democracy cannot stand if all of the new arrivals to the democracy want to vote in such a way that democracy is destroyed. And race has nothing to do with that. That is entirely a cultural problem. In describing Western liberals' aversions to instituting racist, xenophobic immigration policies, he wrote, "We are truly dealing here with an ideology of Western suicide." Let's be fair here. It's not Western liberals doing this, it's Western progressives doing this. Western liberals don't want this because they want liberalism to continue. Trump may be on the wrong side politically and emotionally of this issue of separating migrant kids from their parents. But on the mega issue, the third world invasion of the West, he is riding the great wave of the future if the West is to have a future. And frankly, he's right for many reasons, almost none of them to do with race. The Western world cannot unendingly take in an almost infinite number of poor people from the third world. Our social systems cannot support that kind of burden. The third world needs their own talented people. If you have, a doctor from Central America or from the Middle East, or an engineer or something along those lines, it's far better for the world as a whole for those people to stay at home and help build up their own countries. I know people like Milo have laughed about the West's ability to headhunt and to poach all the best people out of the third world and bring them over here. But frankly, that's not helping anybody in the long run. Western countries have the quality of life that they have largely because the talented people of those countries stayed where they were and built them up. And this process happened over hundreds of years. But that's not happening in Central America or South America. That's not happening in the Middle East or Africa. All of the best and brightest from those countries are coming here. They're not building up their own nations. And most importantly, the third world invasion of the West, a lot of these people coming here from the third world do not want to become Americans, and they do not want to become Canadians, and they do not want to become English. They do not want to become French or German or Italian, and they have no interest in upholding democracy. All manner of current policy grows out of this panic over loss of privilege and power. Immigration policy, voter suppression, Trump economic isolationist impulses, his contempt for people from Haiti and Africa, the Muslim ban, his rage over Black Lives Matter, and social justice protests. Everything. Maybe it's not about the loss of privilege and power. Maybe it's because all of these things are integral to actually keeping the United States alive. And that also includes the protection of the citizenry of the United States, which also includes a lot of non-white people like yourself. This is the biggest problem with social justice-y opinion writers. They mistake citizenship for whiteness. When they see Trump do this policy or that policy, they say, oh, he's doing it for white people. No, he's doing it for citizens. There's a difference. There are many non-white citizens in the United States. And you know what? The social justice left does not care about the non-white citizens of the United States. I'm just gonna guess something here, guys. You know how we see articles here and there talking about performing whiteness, about how Kanye has given up his black card because he's he's thinking a certain way, and he's no longer performing his blackness, he's performing whiteness. Here's my prediction. Within the next 6 months, we're going to find an SJW article, some kind of opinion piece somewhere, that states that citizenship is performing whiteness. If you are a black citizen of the United States, or a Mexican citizen of the United States, or some kind of non-white citizen of the United States, your citizenry is performing whiteness. And it's the dreamers and the proud undocumenteds and the illegals. Those people are the true people of color. Mark my words, guys, it's coming. All right, my friends, that about does it for me. Another SJ Weekly down the hatch. If you enjoy this content and the other content that I do, and you feel like supporting the show, please head over to patreon.com/shortfatotaku, or click on that Patreon link right there, because I definitely could use and do appreciate all the support you guys give me. Also, I do stream some video games and chill with people pretty much 5 times a week over at twitch.tv/shortfatotaku. In fact, if you're watching this video the day it comes out, I'm going to be streaming tonight, probably about 8:30 p.m. EST. And I hope to see your smiling faces in the chat room shitting all over me. New SFO videos coming out probably between Tuesday and Wednesday, and it's called To Bake or Not to Bake. I hope you enjoy it. I love you.